Russell Wilson's a Denver Bronco.
Yeah!
Is a Denver Bronco. The nightmare of the last 6 seasons of the Denver Broncos not having a franchise quarterback are over. And Bloom, I am over the moon with Russell Wilson, now a Denver Bronco. Well, you just unplugged your mic. I can plug you back in. Oh, there you go. Nope. Now we got you.
Wow, this is so Titanic that I had to readjust all my settings to properly broadcast this. Well, see, where do we start? We've known that this organization, you've documented this for a while, has the will to follow through. And there was not a price they were not unwilling to pay. And we've seen the last 2 Super Bowl winners, Tom Brady, free agency, Matthew Stafford, trade. And now that Matthew Stafford trade looks pretty cheap.
They gave up too much for him. They got a ring.
Yeah. So the Broncos, there's urgency. And this is a team that already made 2 Super Bowls and won a Super Bowl by going after Peyton Manning. Obviously, this was something that showed their desire and clarity and will to follow through. There's clarity on the other side, I guess. Rebuilding whenever you have the oldest head coach in the NFL, okay, and you're not going to remain competitive. There's nothing they're going to be able to do. They're not going to do something like turn around and package these picks to get Deshaun Watson. That's not happening. Perhaps at number 9, there was talk that maybe Malik Willis or Kenny Pickett could be the pick at number 9. Maybe he's still the pick at number 9. Maybe a quarterback is still the pick at number 9. But you look at Seattle's roster and see Seattle's roster is now on a level with Houston. They're on a level with, I don't even know if they're as good as Jacksonville's roster right now. So that's where Seattle goes to a reboot. But obviously, the big marquee story here, what the NFL wants to put front and center is 2 times a year, you get combinations of Derek Carr, Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, and Justin Herbert.
Amazing.
Wow. This is going to be all out. Just every game could be your 45-42 kind of game. And I think that as good as the Broncos defense has been, and even though they won a championship, defense wins championships, I think they need offense to win this division.
I think they need that to win the division. And guess what? They got their leader. Now we can jump through a bunch of hoops on what happens here from a fantasy football lens. I think Davante was going to be the centerpiece anyway. And I went back and forth. I'll pull up the text, Bloom, but I had heard, and we had heard a while ago, we had talked about Russell Wilson being unhappy and them being unhappy with him. This was not a, one-sided, like, I'm out of here type of thing. So I was texting, I'll tell you off air who it was. One of our friends that works for NFL Network, and you can probably figure it out. I was like, why did it fall apart in Seattle? And I texted, I said, I heard they didn't like him improvising because Russell Wilson would improvise, and they just want to run the system. Even though it's a bad system, they want to run the system. The offensive line was garbage. He also played hurt, the last 2 years?
Right.
He played hurt. So I received a text from our friend who works for the NFL Network. He said, if they didn't like that, the improvising, maybe their offense should have been better so he didn't have to. This is insanity. The Broncos pull one over here?
I think so. And there's a few variables. One is how much of Russell Wilson's drop-off in the second half of the year was playing through that finger injury. How much of it is maybe a decline. I mean, there was times that you had to try to figure that out because Russell Wilson was making un-Russell Wilson-like decisions and throws. Started to come around by the end of the year. But Russell Wilson was one of those quarterbacks that gave you that sense of inevitability that when there was a play that needed to be made to keep the team in the game, he was going to make the play, and he wasn't making the plays last year. And there's that side of it. And then we don't know what Russell Wilson could do in an offense that embraces his skill set, an offense that gives him room to be an artist that he is, gives him a canvas to paint his masterpiece. There's always been a tug of war in Seattle, and we witness it over the course of a season. What do we think of when we think of Russell Wilson as a fantasy quarterback? Good for half of a season, not so much for the other half of the season. It used to be the first half, then it was the second half. I got that backwards. I don't even know.
Somehow.
Right. And I think that we have never seen a team, Russell Wilson on a team that embraces him as the centerpiece of the offense. Now, you bring up, hey, is Davante Williams still the centerpiece of the offense? We can talk about that, but I think that when the games play out, no matter what the Broncos' game plan was at the beginning of the game, it's going to be Russell Wilson at the end of the game, exactly how it ended up with Seattle. At least when you're facing Patrick Mahomes, when you're facing Justin Herbert, when you're facing Derek Carr, when you're facing Joe Burrow in the playoffs, when you're facing Josh Allen in the playoffs, when you're facing Lamar Jackson in the playoffs, you have to be able to match that kind of quarterback play like we saw at the end of the Buffalo-Kansas City game. And now Denver has the opportunity to do that. And they have an offensive-minded head coach. So Seattle to Denver means going from Pete Carroll, who is a dinosaur in current NFL terms, to Nathaniel Hackett. And that is something that should set up a runway for him to take off or stock the kitchen and the pantry. And let's see what happens, because there are unknowns to this, and we can tease apart the compensation package, Cease, but it's not as much as people think it is.
No, not as much at all, Bloom. I mean, seriously, when we look, and we got a ton to get to in this show, but and we'll speed it up a little bit. But I mean, when you look at this and you go 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, a 5th-round pick, Drew Lock, Noah Fant, and Shelby Harris. And Shelby Harris with an inflated number. And Shelby's fine. Like, I have no problem with Shelby. He's fine. But you give him a quarterback that can't play, a tight end who's been a disappointment, a bunch of picks that you still have 3 picks in the top 100. Because they had 5 picks in the top 100. Now they still have 3 picks in the top 100. They don't have a first rounder, and their second rounder's gone. So they've got the very last pick in the second round, because that's from the Rams, from Von Miller, who, by the way, might now come back.
Yeah, 58.
You'll get a little preview of what we're going to talk about tonight on Nick and Jason. I know Chris Harris was reached out to to possibly be a reunion with the Denver Broncos. Right. So now you have this beacon. I called it the bat signal yesterday. I saw Batman. It's a little bit too long, but it's really, really good. Not the best Batman of all time. Anyway, you have a beacon now. So did you give up too much? Not when we're talking about players that are either fine, like Shelby. Shelby's fine. There's nothing wrong with Shelby Harris. Lots of money for Shelby. There's $8-9 million cap hit. But I mean, giving up on Drew Lock, giving up on Noah Fant.
Right.
You didn't. Seattle didn't get as much as they could have here.
I think so. I think that's very much true. And when we unpack what this compensation package includes, first of all, and this is going to be interesting, Cease, because from a dynasty fantasy standpoint, the Broncos chose Albert Okwuegbunam over Noah Fant. I would say that's the right move in fantasy football, too. The draft capital, the measurables. Well, hey, actually, Okwuegbunam. See, everybody, I think it was our man Matt Schauf from the IDP side of things saying, it's easy, folks. Take a deep breath. You can handle this. I can't this morning, obviously. But the point is that athletically, they're similar, which means they're both outstanding athletes. But Fant, as Matt Waldman explained to everybody yesterday on Twitter, he has not figured out how to marry his incredible physical traits to skills. And you might say it's how he was utilized. You might say it was that the Broncos offense was held back by quarterback play, but Noah Fant has been a disappointment. And I think the Broncos lose almost nothing in their offense by losing him as far as how the offense can function. Shelby Harris is a solid player. It's going to look good next to Poona Ford up front. You know, there's a problem spot, but he's an adequate starter, maybe a slight plus starter. And then Drew Lock, that's like throwing in Mason Rudolph or something like that. So the number 9 pick this year is not worth a number 9 pick in most years. There aren't 10 top 10 picks in this draft. There may not even be 5 or 3. I don't know. But the number 9 pick is not worth as much as the pick value chart would dictate. And then you bring up another point, Cease, that the Broncos have enough picks in this year's draft that they're still going to get their priorities. They're still going to get the players that they were seeking, or otherwise be able to bring in someone on the back half of this. And then you have to assume, and this is one of the keys, of course, this is where Hackett and company have to follow through. If they make the playoffs, the Rams have understood this. McVay has understood this. When you're picking in the back half of the first round picks are expendable. First round picks are currency that you use to make your team better. And not in a long haul format, but in the short term. And there's no doubt that the Broncos are going to be better with Russell Wilson. The only question is how much better.
Yes, and then the Seahawks did something very unusual because it's a quarterback desperate league. They chose the coach over the quarterback. But it's like a new relationship, Bloom, because had Russell Wilson stayed, and they gave him the shot. This last year was his... Right. Anytime you get in I don't want to get too deep or personal, but anytime you get in a relationship and you're like, let's give it one more shot.
Yeah.
Let's try our best to be, but there's always still that other stuff like, oh, he still leaves the toilet seat up and all that. Like there's still all those things that are still there, even though you are trying to put your best foot forward. Russell played hurt. Pete Carroll did, and he tried, and they tried to we'll do it your way this time, Russell. And it didn't work, so they move on. And Seattle chose the coach over the quarterback. That's interesting.
And the coach and the GM, I think John. I think it's Schneider and Carroll at this point, clearly. And another part of this picture is interim ownership, right? Paul Allen, rest in peace. And this is another situation where perhaps those personal relationships swayed that. But you look at Seattle now, and they already released Bobby Wagner. So it's truly an end of an era. They both join the team on the same day, and they both leave the team on the same day. The end of an era. And now Wagner is out there. He becomes the prize of the off-ball linebacker class. The next question is, what about Tyler Lockett? I know there's rumors out there that Tyler Lockett's available. It just follows that in this rebuilding format, they just extended Tyler Lockett, I think it was last offseason. But it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to keep that high-priced asset when you're going into rebuilding. So that's something we're going to look at. And you're looking at Seattle in a 3 or 4 year rebuilding process. Is Pete Carroll the person you want overseeing that right now? I don't think so, but I think this is where we get back to how franchises are run, Cease, and where those loyalties are, and it doesn't match up with wins and losses, and it doesn't match up with what the fans would want.
And Pete Carroll's oldest head coach in the league?
Yeah. 70.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Have we exhausted? Oh, by the way, super quick because actually on with Chad Brown in like 40 minutes. But anyway, the Broncos are for sale.
Yeah.
Do the Broncos go for a little bit more now because they have Russell Wilson?
Sure. A Super Bowl championships add value to the franchise. And I think just the amount of coverage, the amount of attention the team will get now. I know Denver's not a huge market, but I think it's going to be one that has a ton of attention, much in the same way with Peyton Manning signed. And then, see, I'll tee this last one up for you before we turn the page because there's a lot more going on too. Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, Cortland Sutton. I'm going to say Cortland Sutton.
Yeah, Sutton's the DK. And Sutton's red zone usage, he had 2 red zone targets last year. Oh, wait, no, that was Jeudy. Sorry, Jeudy had 2 red zone targets. I'll look up what Sutton's red zone. Either way, if we look over the last 3 years, DK Metcalf has had 29 touchdowns.
Right.
And Sutton's had 8.
Right.
So
it's Sutton. I think Sutton's the buy. I think Jeudy might be a sell on the anticipation of value addition. And Tim Patrick's still there under the radar, nobody understanding that he is a starter and an entrenched key piece of this offense, more so than Jeudy, even though Jeudy had a much larger investment. Draft pick-wise, Patrick's got the more recent investment, money.
Well, the day started with the first news, Bloom, and was this done on purpose out of spite? That's my question, because the Aaron Rodgers news breaks, and about an hour and a half later, the Russell Wilson news breaks. Aaron Rodgers stays in Green Bay. So let's talk about this and the decision to stay in Green Bay, the decision to be well compensated in Green Bay. What took so long? Was he truly torn? he was plan A for the Broncos. I know some people have thought that. It was Wilson all the time. I was texting with one of my buddies who's he's a host on the Fan as well. And he's like, it was Wilson all along. I'm like, no, it wasn't, dude. He's like, I've got the receipts on Twitter. And I'm like, Twitter sucks, dude. Like, I got receipts. I'm like, what do we got receipts for? That doesn't mean anything. And I just said, we'll agree to disagree. And I know Aaron Rodgers was plan A. And when they got the word, because things changed. Senior Bowl, it was 100% Aaron Rodgers coming to Denver. Combine, it was, wait a second.
Yeah.
Wait a second. And that's when they aggressively started to pursue Russell Wilson. So the fact that the news came out within an hour and a half and stole all of Rodgers' thunder, was it done out of spite? I don't know. Don't think so. But Rodgers is staying in Green Bay. And I was a little bitter, blew him on Twitter. And I said, well, good luck not winning a Super Bowl in Green Bay.
Maybe. Yeah, it's interesting, too, because also one of the things we've heard in the wake of this is that Washington made a stronger offer draft pick-wise and was willing to throw in players. When you say willing to throw in players, again, people might look at Noah Fant and his stats and the first-round pick and the measurables and think, well, that's a good asset. Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, Logan Thomas may end up being a more valuable player on the field than Noah Fant. So the idea was that Seattle didn't want to trade Wilson within the NFC. So that's good news for Aaron Rodgers staying in Green Bay. You franchise tag Davante Adams. There had already been restructuring some players, I think, in anticipation of this. And it's Green Bay now also making their push on the NFC side to hopefully not be a perennial disappointment again this year in the playoffs. But this is one of those situations, and I was surprised that Wilson got traded just because I think the Rodgers situation illustrates that the smart money is always the status quo, that things are likely to stay similar or the same as they are. And hat tip to all the Packers fans who said at the beginning of the offseason, hey, he's staying. And I think that he just maximized his position to maximize his compensation. And he probably, I know we've said, did Rodgers know what he was going to do? Maybe he was making his mind. I think he kind of had an idea what he was going to do all along. Anyway, assuming they were going to keep Davante Adams. But I want to fast forward to next January and say, okay, fine, you're going to be in the playoffs again. You're going to win the division again. You're going to have home games in the playoffs again. Can you actually finish?
That's the question, which leads me to a text, and I'll tell you off air who it was with. I texted one of my buddies that works for Green Bay, and I said, or should I say, is around the building. How about that? That's always the best way to say it. Anyway, I said, Rodgers stay with you guys. Russ comes to my guys. Sounds like we need to celebrate. Little bottle. And he texts me back and he goes, we will at the Super Bowl. Denver, Green Bay Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So I love the narrative street of that, Bloom. I'm sure you would as well. But, what is left for Rodgers? How many years are left? People always talk about, well, you're going to play as long as Tom Brady, who still could play, by the way. I think that's what Packers fans are thinking about now. Now you've committed. You make the run. You have to, and not just the normal run.
Right.
You have to make it to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
He's been to one. He won one against the Steelers. But, you have to make it to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's the thing that Green Bay, with these moves, sets expectations, Super Bowl or bust. Quite literally, it's a bust of a season if they don't make the Super Bowl. So that adds pressure. This team already probably feels pressure based on their playoff underachieving last year. And it sets up a great story. And then we'll see, I think, the other dominoes, because it really was that everybody was waiting for Aaron Rodgers, and then you saw the second domino fall. I think Kirk Cousins is likely to stay in Minnesota, and that sets up a bidding war for, drumroll, Jimmy Garoppolo.
And there will be a three-way trade that Garoppolo will wind up in Seattle. You know how 49ers and Seattle players are.
Right,
they're just like back and forth. They wouldn't trade together, but and I don't think he winds up there. I think Seattle's just kind of stuck. I also don't think Malik Willis will be there at 9, but that's just
Carolina.
Me. And I don't think Malik Willis is the answer at 9. Again, we'll have our live show tomorrow with the ever popular Matt Waldman.
Right.
And we'll go over more quarterback stuff like we did last week. But these are not the droids you're looking for, and these are not the QBs you're looking for.
No, and you also have, adding to this conversation, I think with Tom Silverstein saying now they have to trade Jordan Love. I mean, it's just, why are you holding on to Jordan Love as an asset? Now, I don't think they're lucky if they can get a late second for him. They're lucky if they can get the Josh Rosen package for him. I don't even think they can get that at this point. And that's another name now that enters this quarterback conversation. But if Jordan Love drafting Malik Willis, you're still going all the way back to square one, and you're setting, again, a 3 or 4 year plan. Jimmy Garoppolo is the quarterback that can fool a team into thinking we can win with him this year. So whether it's Washington, it's all the same teams, right? Pittsburgh, we'll see. But I think Garoppolo, the shoulder surgery's done. Adam Schefter's been reporting they expect the trade to get done this month, and we'll see. And then the other narrative this sets up, Cease, of course, is what did the 49ers give up to move up for Trey Lance? Granted, extremely favorable contract, getting a rookie quarterback. What did the Broncos give up to get Russell Wilson, and so on? Lots of intrigue, lots of things to absorb, and we're just getting started this offseason.
Yeah, we're just getting started. Bloom, why is it the math with Aaron Rodgers that people would bring up? Like, well, he doesn't like throwing interceptions because the advanced data says that when you throw interceptions, then you're less likely. And I remember the game against the 49ers and watching that, having picked the Packers, I was just like, why are they staying so safe?
Yeah.
Like, you have an opportunity to, not necessarily clown hammer the team, weather, all that kind of stuff. But like, you have an opportunity to put your foot on the gas. You do it in the playoffs, because if you just hang around and we're ahead by 3, so let's just kind of be conservative, then a special teams gaffe happens and you lose. Right. So people have pointed to Aaron Rodgers' reluctance to throw picks. I think it's actually easy just to go to Rodgers and be like, let it rip, man. Yeah. Who cares about the picks? Let it rip.
Yeah, well, it's really a microcosm of a larger mentality this team needs to have to fulfill its destiny. If its destiny is to win a Super Bowl, to let her rip, whatever we're talking about, because I think it's a team, and this could be Rodgers' personality. We thought it was Mike McCarthy, but it's persisted beyond Mike McCarthy. It could be partially LaFleur's personality, where they do play afraid to lose or to try to not lose instead of seizing the game and playing to win. And you bring up the special teams, and Cease, I think that any Packers fan that is really tuned in is asking, okay, great, what are we going to do about the special teams? What are we going to do about this situation that cost us a chance to win a Super Bowl?
Cost us. All right. Franchise tags, Bloom. Are there 6 of them? Is that right? Do I have that right? 6 players were franchise tagged. So we're going to switch the conversation from Rodgers to franchise tags. And let's go ahead and we'll go over all of them, but we'll talk about the fantasy assets, including 3 tight ends. What was the tight end number? 11 million?
11 million, yeah.
Top of my head? Okay. Yeah. So Mike Gesicki, David Njoku, and Dalton Schultz, all franchise tagged. Good moves for their teams. Well, Schultz and Gesicki, sure. And Njoku, that was interesting for me, right? Because it's like, well, he's good. They just don't really use him. And they have 3 tight ends.
Yeah. And by the way, Rich Bisaccia was the answer for what the Packers did about the special teams.
Well, they did the best they could possibly do. Bisaccia is amazing.
Yeah, he is. So you started at the right point, which is the tag number for tight ends is low. 10.9 million, 11 million. It's nothing. And I mean, now granted, what it does show you is the Kelsey contract, the Kittle contract were really good team-friendly contracts, and tight ends are generally underpaid. Only running backs are paid less than tight ends when you look at the scale. So this makes these decisions a lot easier. The simplest one to look at, Cease, is Gesicki. And I think that Gesicki, you can argue, because of the revolving door of offensive coordinators, because the different quarterbacks up and down quarterback play, that we haven't seen Gesicki leveraged the way that, a big athletic slot receiver like him can be leveraged in this offense. I don't think Mike McDaniel is going to do anything like turn him into George Kittle. He's not George. Mike McDaniel's not stupid. Mike McDaniel's not looking at Mike Gesicki and saying, I can do the same things with him that I did with George Kittle. Okay? Right. But certainly this is, even if it's just a strategic to. I'm not saying they're going to tag and trade, but I'm not saying they're going to sign him to a long-term extension either. It's just that's a winning proposition, and you can start to look at a pass offense now with Jalen Waddle, with Mike Gesicki, and then we'll see. Davante Parker, we'll see how he fits into the plans. He's kind of reverted back to his injury-prone form, but this could be a team that are players for wide receivers, and it's pretty straightforward. Cleveland players for wide receivers, they were in on Calvin Ridley. We'll talk about that. They may or may not keep Jarvis Landry, and I think if they can sign David Njoku to a long-term deal, that could be another sign they're not going to keep Jarvis Landry. But they're going to be players in the wide receiver market. But the Njoku franchise tag just brings up the question of when are they going to use him to the level that they seem to value him? There's something out of sync here. Njoku is still young. I think came into the league at 20 and has flashed, including last year. But there's, according to reports, no plans. I think it was Jeremy Fowler saying no plans to let go of Austin Hooper. And that means that probably from a fantasy
standpoint, Bryant's
and there's still Harrison Bryant, right? So he's going to be disappointing for fantasy, even though this move would seem to indicate they would have a larger role for him. And from a fantasy standpoint, it's also disappointing that Njoku can't get paired up with an organization that values him as much as Cleveland does, but might actually use him to his fullest. And then we get to Dalton Schultz. Boy, there's a lot to untangle here. See, can I just say this first as a little conversation from the conversation? The salary cap is real. Yeah?
I think so.
Yes. It's real. It's real because Amari Cooper's probably going to get released, right? He's going to be on the market.
Yes.
$20 million, too much. It's only a $6 million cap hit if they release him. DeMarcus Lawrence, they go to and say, will you take a pay cut? And he says, no. The salary cap's real. Michael Gallup, there's talk. Last week there was talk that they're closing in on a deal with Michael Gallup. But the Cowboys had hard choices to make. And it looks like Cooper's out. They also, by the way, on that DeMarcus Lawrence front, they have to choose Randy Gregory, who has finally come around, played up to his ability, stayed on the field. He's out there. So they might be in a situation where they're choosing between maybe releasing Lawrence and keeping Gregory. These are difficult choices. But the easy choice here was keeping Schultz because, again, at $11 million, that's a reasonable price for him for this year. Maybe they can leverage it into a long-term deal. And from a fantasy standpoint, we love CeeDee Lamb likely moving up to being the number one target. But it's Schultz who seems to be the target that Dak Prescott's most comfortable with. It's Schultz that has really taken his role. There was also news earlier this offseason that Blake Jarwin is going to have hip surgery. So poor Blake Jarwin gets paid and just immediately starts to break down. All this sets up for Dalton Schultz to be somebody that you don't think of him on a par with Kyle Pitts and George Kittle and Mark Andrews, but statistically, he may end up around those guys as a centerpiece now of this pass offense.
I am all about players getting as much money as possible. Because the players are rich, the owners are wealthy. There's a difference, and they don't want to give rid of that money. But Zeke might have ruined all running back contracts behind him.
Yeah.
If you're Jonathan Taylor, you might get pissed at Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah. Well, and there's a whole other scene. I mean, all this stuff's interconnected, which is what makes it fun. And our jumping off point is always the fate of players, the fate of teams. But what else do we have going on right now? Saquon Barkley, the new regime for the Giants, saying, yeah, we're open to trading him. The word comes back. Dan Dugan, I think, says at the combine, the word is he's only worth a fourth-round pick. And what it's telling you, Cecil, is the decision about making a second contract offer to a running back is a liability. It's an asset teams don't want. They don't want to have to say, if we want to keep Barkley's services, we're going to have to pay him what the market dictates. But what is the market even going to dictate? It might even be less than $11 million. The Panthers are open to trading Christian McCaffrey for a first-round pick and a player that doesn't have a low cap number, a high cap number, according to David Newton of ESPN. Who wants to pay that? Who wants to pay Christian McCaffrey the top running back salary in the league? Nobody does. It's just not a position that the value added by plus starters changes the outcome of games. It just doesn't happen. It's a position where the production can be harvested by a competent player if there's execution around the offense. And I think that, yes, the Ezekiel Elliott contract is a direct antecedent and putting off Dak Prescott's extension. If they had paid Dak Prescott after 3 years under a rookie contract at the going rate, extended him for 7-10 years, into the sunset, they would not have to be making these hard choices. But I think the decision to keep Dalton Schultz for them was an easy one.
Okay, the rest of the franchise tags include Orlando Brown, Jesse Bates, and we didn't really talk about Davante, but yeah, Davante.
Yeah.
Which, had to be part of it's okay, Aaron, we'll make sure we take care of Davante. And now you have until July 15th to work out long-term deals with all of these players.
Right.
Yeah, where the hell does Green Bay get their money? Like, they were not that long ago, and I'm talking about a couple of days, about $30 million over the cap a couple of days ago. Now they got Rodgers, and then now they're franchise tag Adams. You had to have the money as soon as you tagged a player, and that was $22 million for Adams.
Yeah. So the Bengals keeping Jesse Bates, that's easy. Homegrown player and a key player in the back of that defense. Everybody made at least one big play on their march to the Super Bowl. And it's the kind of player that the center fielder matched up with Von Bell, who they signed in free agency. That was easy. That was fully expected. Chris Godwin is an interesting one, because it's just, who's going to throw the ball to him? Okay, great. You have all this money tied up between Godwin and Evans. You hope to have a long-term deal with Godwin. Who's the quarterback going to be? How are you going to get value when you get into these one-year contracts under the franchise tag? Well, you should have a plan to get the value back that you're putting in. I don't know how that's going to work until we know what their quarterback plans are. Did we mention Orlando Brown? Another slam dunk no-brainer. Right, that trade has worked out really well. And then we get to Cam Robinson. This is odd. This is really odd. And I don't know if people should be doing the draft math here that, okay, they're not going to take a tackle. Now they're going to take Aiden Hutchinson at number 1.
No.
Because, again, is this a predicate to working out a long-term deal with Robinson? I don't know. Otherwise, it's money wasted because this team is not looking to compete this year. It's not going to compete this year. And then you're just putting off your comp pick to another year. And I don't quite understand the logic. I think that it was probably the least optimal path for this team to take with this decision. But then again, you keep Trent Baalke, and, well, that's what you get.
That's what you get. We didn't talk about Chris Godwin either.
Yeah, Godwin. And I think with Godwin, again, it's just a question of what is Tampa going to do about their quarterback? It's a situation where at least we can look at Denver and Seattle, and we see teams that have clarity about whether they're making a push or whether they're regrouping and looking longer term. Minnesota is a team at this fork in the road with Kirk Cousins, with Adam Thielen, with Danielle Hunter, with Eric Kendricks, a lot of Harrison Smith, all kinds of players that, depending on your stance, are we competing, or can we really push for a Super Bowl this year, or even push to win the division over Aaron Rodgers? If not, these assets are not going to be more valuable next year. Mm-hmm. And also, you have the idea of freeing up cap space this year to make moves. I think you're looking at Minnesota probably saying, let's try to give it one more year. With Tampa, you have a team that was assembled to try to win back-to-back Super Bowls. And now that Tom Brady has, I'm making air quotes, retired, what's the plan? If you're keeping Chris Godwin, it sure sounds like your plan is to be competitive this year. And look, the NFC South might be a division with a 7 or 8 game win team going to the playoffs. So it's understandable that they might think they're still the best team in the division. But without a quarterback, I don't know how they get the value out of Chris Godwin getting that franchise tag for the second straight year.
Why didn't the Titans franchise tag Landry? Just give him more time.
They signed him. They
did sign him.
They signed him last night to almost the exact same deal that Bud Dupree got, a 5-year, $82 million, something like that.
Yeah, that happened at 9:03 p.m.
Maybe a better question, Cecil, is why didn't the Patriots franchise tag J.C. Jackson? He gone. That's it. And I believe, I might be speaking a little bit outside of my expertise here, that the Patriots defense relies on strong outside corners. And J.C. Jackson was that guy. It was one of the reasons that they could move on from Stephon Gilmore. But now what's the plan? In some ways, the decisions to not franchise tag players are just as interesting as the decisions to tag players. And like you said, Landry was one. It's a stocked edge class. You mentioned Von Miller, Chandler Jones is out there, Emmanuel Ogba is out there, Randy Gregory's out there, who you already mentioned. Justin Houston is out there, Jerry Hughes is out there, Derek Barnett is out there. There's a lot of options in the edge class. So that, I think, could have informed the Titans, but they had a plan to keep him. And even though they didn't get use the tag and create that potential additional leverage, it seems like they were able to meet in the middle. And then there's still the lingering thing, of course, that the Titans were one of the teams mentioned as a potential destination for Aaron Rodgers, along with the Steelers. And everyone's dunking on the Steelers.
It was never
yeah, right. Everyone's dunking on the Steelers now.
They want Malik Willis. Yeah, it's the worst kept secret in the league. They want Malik Willis. They're going to have to move up probably now in front of Seattle. Or they'll have to trade with Seattle just like they could have traded with Denver. They want Malik Willis. Bloom, staying in the AFC South.
Yeah.
And this is another preview of a cannonball tonight. Again, Nick and Cecil lingo. But the Colts, very upset that they did not get Russell Wilson. What the hell is that team doing? Like you said, people were dunking on the Steelers, right? Okay, hey, big punching bag, 1 million Super Bowl rings. We'll be fine. But anyway, the hell are the Colts doing? Especially if they're now looking at what Denver gave up, which wasn't much. It's a blockbuster. Oh, really? Drew Lock? What? No, that's not much. What the hell is the Colts' plan?
Yeah, they kind of set themselves back by making that trade for Carson Wentz. They used up good draft picks they could have dangled in a trade. And they have a quarterback. The reporting earlier this offseason has been they're in the market for a new quarterback and that they're open to a Carson Wentz trade. Obviously, they're going to get a lot less for him than they would have gotten. You try to sell him on that 27-7 touchdown interception ratio and so on, but they're stuck. And see, this is an example where the quarterback moves you make, like getting Matthew Stafford, can put you over the top, but they can also set you back. And maybe sometimes it's the quarterback moves you don't make that leave you open when the next window comes to do something better. And I think the Colts want to try to create a window that it's just not possible because of the position they put themselves in. I want to mention another thing real quick, by the way, on franchise tags. Mike Williams, not franchise tagged because he was signed to a 3-year, $60 million deal, $40 million guaranteed, which should give you an idea. $20 million a year for Mike Williams. And we also saw Josh Reynolds. Brad Holmes doing work, man. Mm-hmm. Josh Reynolds, 2 years, $12 million. That is a sweet deal. That's at max $12 million. And you have continuity with Jared Goff. You have a sense of a player that started to really riff at the end of the season. I think his deal was like 1 year, $5 million whenever he ended up with Tennessee. So I think that there's definitely something here with Josh Reynolds and showing us with between $20 million for Mike Williams and $6 million a year for Josh Reynolds. Be ready to be surprised by some of these numbers. Be ready to think, really? That much for that guy? Because money's cheap and teams are going to spend like the cap is going to go up every year again after that brief pause. So there's all kinds of math in our heads. Like Mike Williams is worth $20 million a year. Amari Cooper isn't. Maybe, at least to the Cowboys in the situation they're in. And the wheels are just starting to turn.
Yes, as the new league year approaches rapidly in legal tampering, there's always tampering.
Yeah.
You know that. You don't even need Lassie Barks for that. You know that. It's the Audible. He's Sigmund Bloom. I am Cecil Lammey. Watch the video all the way to the end, please. It helps with the YouTube algorithm and gets us in front of people who maybe aren't yet familiar with this show. And we appreciate you guys for doing that. Also, like, comment, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. Follow Sigmund on Twitter, @Sigmund Bloom. The show is at The Audible. I am at Cecil Lammey saying thanks very much for watching, everyone. Love you all. Stay tuned. And as always, stay frosty.